Welcome to the iStorm Women's Channel and the 16 Days of Activism podcast in support of UN Women UK and fundraising for Safe Spaces Now.
Public spaces need to be safe and inclusive for all now. A report by UN Women UK reveals how common sexual harassment is in the UK. 97% of women my age said they had experienced harassment. Your ideas to support us have already started making a change. At music festivals, with taxi companies, on public transport, in organisations and in online spaces. It's time for a change. Please support Safe Spaces Now by donating to the cause or get involved. You can find the link next to this video. Thank you.
So I want to say thank you so much, first of all, for joining us in this campaign to create awareness around violence against women and girls. In this episode, we're going to be talking about race violence in particular. And as always, discussions of violence may contain some sensitive content. But if you feel able to stick around, please do. I think this is going to be a really informative and insightful discussion. My name is Caitlin Rajan. I'm a student at the University of Cambridge studying human, social and political sciences, particularly studying gendered violence and what we can do to create a safer world. I'm so pleased to have two participants on this podcast, Dr. Dharshana Sridhar and Abena Kelly, who are going to share their knowledge and expertise on this topic. So I'm going to hand over to them to let them introduce themselves first of all. Maybe Abena, starting with you, just tell us a little bit about what you do and how it's related to this topic of race violence in particular.
Okay, so yes, I'm Abena Kelly. I am a councillor, so in the political sense, town and district council, deputy mayor of my town, which is Folkestone, and chair of the council. I also do leadership training with Labour Women's Network, and basically, my interest in this is I do a lot of EDI training. So I talk about misogynoir and intersectionality, and I do a lot of training in regards to trying to empower women to get into STEM careers and to just continuing their leadership journey in general. Thank you.
Amazing. That's perfect. And Dharshana?
Hi, I'm Dharshana Sridhar. I'm a councillor, but an independent councillor, so not affiliated to anything at the moment. I am also a trustee at Peterborough branch of Women's Aid. I do a lot of work with women from the South Asian community who need help and support following abuse or trafficking. So I started a forum called Samraksha, and as a result of that, I'm now with the Women's Aid, and I lead on the Home Office's a project, Dahlia project, that is something we're doing in the east of England to help more South Asian women reach out for support. Thank you.
That's amazing. Thank you both so much. So I'm just going to start with a question that I think will be a good foundation for our conversation. I'm curious what you would both, and Abena, maybe you can answer this first. Could you tell us what race violence means from your perspective?
So there's the actual formal definition of what a hate crime is. So the formal definition is a hate crime is any criminal offence which is perceived by the victim or any other person to be motivated by a hostility or prejudice based on the person's race or perceived race, their perceived religion or their actual religion, a disability or perceived disability, if the person's transgender or their sexuality or so on, and they're perceived. So what actually happens quite a lot of the time is that even the perception of somebody being from a particular race can actually mean that there's violence against them. But also, if we talk about intersectionality, I spoke about how race violence talks about somebody's race, their religion. It also includes, for example, if they're asylum seeker and whatever. So if you think about it, there are certain races that might actually meet all of that criteria. So they might have a certain race which is different from the norm in this country. They might have a different sexuality, a sexuality which is, again, not the standard sexuality for people in this country, or is not the majority anyway. It's still a standard for them. It's the norm for them. And their religion as well. So, for example, at the moment, we have a lot of hate crime and violence against people who are from the Jewish community or from the Muslim community. So that's the definition. But again, it's important that we talk about the perception. So if somebody perceives you as being any of those things, that could mean that they're going to have some sort of hate towards you. But for me, on a personal level, it's about the context of, if we're talking about the context of violence against women and girls, it's about colonialism, it's about racism, it's about societal and cultural norms, it's about misogynoir, it's about colorism, it's about colonialism, which gives you these, there might be these internalized hate, and you have to work through that because societal norms actually invalidate you as a human being, especially as a woman who is not what is seen as the epitome of beauty, the epitome of femininity. There's that you need to fight against, and you need to fight against it internally as well as externally.
Yeah. And Darshana, I know you spoke to specifically working with South Asian women, and I was going to say, from your perspective, in terms of what race violence means, would you say a similar thing? And would you say that your experience working with South Asian women in particular informs how you see race violence as a topic?
Yes, I think it is everything that Bana said, but it's also the additional trauma. So when there is a violence and you're trying to report or seek help, it is the additional trauma, the additional layer of discrimination that all these women face. And it's not the intersectionality, it's not just the gender and the race, you know, as Abena said it very well. It's about their religion, it's about their culture, it's about so many different stigma they're already facing. But then when you try to seek help, you're also faced with discrimination on the basis of race. The other, you know, so it just adds layer upon layer of trauma for a lot of these women. And for me, it's the same thing. It's the internalized colonialism and misogyny and all of the things that's internalized that, you know, the legal world or whatever is happening in society allows people to just demonstrate. And so that means people seeking help are not able to seek the help as everyone else should. There's no equality in that. So, yeah.
Yeah, amazing. And you've both spoken to something really interesting, which is this sort of internal dynamic. So I was wondering what you would both say, again, Abena, maybe coming to you first, what the impact of race violence is on women and girls as you've maybe witnessed it in the work you've done.
So because the sort of standardized, I mean, this is something that I always try to explain to people, and they're like, what are you talking about? And so something as simple as taking a photograph, the actual coloring and the color balance that's used in photos, on cameras, on your phone, or anything really, is based on a white brunette woman. So for example, if you are somebody who is not that color and a photo is taken of you with a group of people, you come out a lot darker and you can't actually be seen. And it's something as basic as that. It's something as basic as when you look on the TV, when you look in media, when you look at what is defined as beautiful, what is defined as valid, what is defined as feminine, sometimes you're not included in that definition. And so you start thinking, well, there must be something wrong with me. I need to be closer to that ideal of what a woman is to make me valid. And you have to really, really fight that. Because if the whole world is saying something, it's actually really difficult for you to say, no, that's wrong. That's wrong. Because the whole world, like, you're fighting against the whole world who's telling you that actually, no, you're not beautiful. No, you're not intelligent. No, you're not worthwhile. These people are more intelligent than you. These people are more beautiful than you. And or what they do is that they find people who are closer to or a facsimile of what they identify as being the standard, and then they might be Black as well. So that's why I spoke about colorism. But the closer they are to whiteness, the more likely that they're seen as beautiful. So if you look at somebody like Beyonce, she is a Black artist, but she's incredibly light. She usually has blonde hair. She has Eurocentric features. So you're being told, right, okay, you can be Black, but you have to be a certain type of Black to be attractive, to be valid, to be successful.
And I think this is something that maybe you can both speak to further, which is First of all, how prevalent would you say this is in the UK context? But also, I mean, are there specificities in the way that this is experienced specifically within the UK that you think are particularly informative of what the experience of race violence is like? Yeah, I'm sure you can both speak to that, actually.
Just to add to what Abena just said about the impact, the photograph, my daughters talk about this all the time. When they take photos, the filters are not for our skin tone, it's all different, and they keep. But I recently found out that disabled people who are in wheelchairs usually get pressure sores. And in this country, the medical curriculum or the nursing curriculum does not teach people to find pressure sores at the beginning of it for people with non-Caucasian skin, with different skin tones. The only time you find it is in stage 2 when the skin breaks. I was appalled when I found out. This was very recent. And one of the reasons given is apparently it's too expensive to change the textbooks. But it's exactly. So it's every little thing that we have to fight for makes it that much harder. And it silences a lot of voices. There are those of us who are able to voice it and who are able to advocate, but there are a lot of voices, and especially in the South Asian community, the community itself can make you, can silence you, you're ostracized or stigmatized, you shouldn't, go against the norm, all of these different things. And so it makes it so much harder for people to come out. And, if you don't see someone like yourself in certain positions or accepted, or then you just feel like, you're not good enough. There's no point in you going anywhere or seeking any help. So it just makes that so much harder for them to seek justice, but it also makes it harder for, any normal person wanting that validity to get it. So the impact is, I think it's generations of impact, and it's, and it's really sad, but it looks like it's progressing, not coming down.
I would add that I was looking at some statistics, so I will throw out statistics throughout, but the most recent report that I could get hold of, which is from the end of March 2021 to year ending March 2022, when we talk about hate crime, racially motivated hate crime accounts for over 2/3 of all such offences. So out of all the different types of hate crime that I was talking about, racially motivated, so it's 70% of hate crime offences are in regards to racially motivated hate crimes. And the Home Office says that studies have found that although not universal, victims of hate crime often experience greater post-victimization distress, including anxiety, depression, withdrawal, than victims of equivalent non-prejudiced offences. So, for example, if somebody burgles you, and you know it has nothing to do with hate crime, that's one thing. But if they burgled you because they hate you because you're Black or you're Southeast Asian or you're whatever, that actually has more impact, because that it's actually an attack on you as an individual, an attack on your identity. And one thing, this study it's absolutely shocking, but it actually shows, I'm sure, quite a lot of people who do come from, identities in the global majority will completely understand this. But there was a study done of 800 Black African Americans over 25 years. People who had reported experiencing high levels of racial discrimination when they were young teenagers had significantly high levels of depression in their 20s than those who hadn't. So the cumulative effect of race, the trauma of actual race violence, actually means that you are chronologically in age and you're 20 years older in your body than somebody else who is exactly the same age, because of the level of trauma. So it actually has it makes physiological changes to your body because of the level of trauma that you're on. And people, usually, if they haven't had that experience, maybe they come from an identity which is, the majority, they don't realize the level of trauma that you experience on a daily basis can actually impact on you biologically on a cellular level, not just, I feel traumatized. I'm actually older in my body. If you test how old I am, I'm 20 years older than somebody else who has not experienced that level of trauma. That's the level of, that's the impact that it has on you.
And it brings us to a really interesting point in terms of speaking to that context, understanding the experiences that people go through. I mean, I'm curious what you both think. Maybe Darshana, you can begin in terms of what support there is at the moment in the UK in terms of dealing with race violence, or just what the current context looks like in terms of who are the key actors that are actually recognizing and then trying to deal with this issue of race violence.
I actually think I would have to say some of the charities and people like Abena and myself and others. But if you take from an institutional context, there is very less available in terms of support. I can give an example of someone I helped a couple of years ago. She was a migrant woman. She was a well-educated migrant woman from India. She came here, she got married and came here, and she went through domestic abuse, and she was educated enough to call the police. And she was not given the help she needed. It was more about her immigration status, but also there was a comment that was made, and it was a female member of the criminal justice system who made the comment saying, your culture, isn't it about being submissive? If you just listen to him, it's going to be okay. She was appalled. She was appalled. And even the charity she approached, she did not get the help she wanted. And that was because, and this is what prompted me to start Samrakshan in the first place, because there was no one who looked like her who would understand her experiences. And so it was going to, be a problem. And so she approached through a friend of a friend. And this is how I realized this was happening, and I helped her, and because she approached me, but there's another case, and it's a live case, and I'm not going to comment on it, where she approached and she didn't get the help, and it's now a domestic homicide on racial violence, and now they're looking back to see what lessons could have been learned, but how many have happened so far already? I mean, we're still learning, obviously, but we have to implement something in. And I do know MPs have spoken about this in Parliament. I do know with the domestic abuse bill, when it was going through, it's an act now, we were trying so hard to get certain firewalls, certain protections in. But no, it didn't happen. And it's still something we're learning or discussing whilst people are losing lives, sadly, yeah.
Abena, has the same been true in your experience as well in terms of the support offered in the UK?
I think the main issue is the fact that people don't think about the intersectionality of these women. There might be instances where you have support services for women, support services for LGBT people, support services for disabled people, but actually trying to bring all of that together, and for somebody who is supporting you to realize that, yes, of course, yes, I'm a woman, I'm experiencing domestic violence, but I also have my religion, I have my race, I have my sexuality, I have all of these other factors which are playing on how I can interact with you and how you can interact with me. And the sort of education that's needed for these support services in regards to cultural understanding, and also, as I said, that intersectionality is lacking. So sometimes certain things are missed out on because, for example, they're thinking it's too many things to be, too many balls to be sort of throwing in the air. But actually for that woman, that's her life, that she does have to live all of those identities at once. She can't separate the fact that she's a woman from the fact that she's Southeast Asian, from the fact that she might be Muslim, from the fact that, she can't separate all of those things from the sort of culture or familial arrangement that she has. She can't separate those. And it's really important to actually see that person as an individual and not as a monolith of what Asian women are supposed to be like, what Black women are supposed to be like. That person is an individual with multiple things working on them. I did actually collect some details about different organizations working in regards to welfare, in regards to different religions and different races and so on. But I wanted to make a note because this was one of the questions that we were supposed to cover about some of the other impacts on minority groups and people who are from ethnic backgrounds in regards to misogynoir, because I know that some people don't know what that means, but it was coined by a Black feminist called Moya Bailey in 2010, and it's where racism and sexism meet. So imagine, this is a very sexist world. That's my perception anyway. But then we also have the racism. And if you're Black and you're a woman, that's both of those things working at once. So it's not just that you've got that one layer of oppression, you've got two layers of oppression. And if it comes to your religion as well, you might have another layer of oppression. And as, the good doctor was saying, actually, you have multiple layers of trauma that you're working on. It's not just that one layer of trauma. And to be honest, for most people, it is like that. But then we're talking about women and girls. So with girls, we have adultification. So adultification is a concept where notions of innocence and vulnerability are not afforded to certain groups. So a study was actually done, this is Davis and Marsh 2020, was actually done that showed that when it comes to Black girls, for example, from the age of about 5, they're no longer seen as innocent. So that means that the duty of care that you normally would have towards children, you don't have them. That means that the sort of racialized tropes that you have against Black women in particular, the fetishization of Black women, the sexualization of Black women, this thing about these strong Black women, you sort of displace that onto children. You adultified them. And I'm sure you've all heard of the case of Child Q, where this child who was actually menstruating, who was in an exam, it was already locked down, but she was in school in a mock exam, and the teacher apparently smelt weed on her, smelt cannabis on her, and called the police. Now, I used to be a teacher. In teaching, we have something which we call in loco parentis. So you are in place of the parent. So that teacher was not in loco parentis because a parent would not call the police on their child. They would say, is there a problem? Is there an issue? They would speak to the child. But so that was the first failure of the school. The next failure was the police who actually turned up and then didn't say, why have you phoned us? They didn't say that. They took the child, into a room with no teachers, no responsible adults. The child was menstruating, had to take her clothes off, including, obviously, the menstruation. And you'd imagine that. And then was examined. Nothing was found on her. Nothing was found on her at all. But it was only because somebody smelt something. Now, the actual case review, and I'm going to read this because honestly, it's unbelievable. But I had some research about it, about the impact that had on her. And we're talking about impact. It does have an impact. So she can't go a single day without wanting to scream, shout, cry, or just give up. The girl's maternal aunt has quoted as saying the pupil had changed from top of the class to a shell of her former bubbly self, adding she was now self-harming and requires therapy. The review said the impact on Child Q had been profound and the repercussions obvious and ongoing, with family members describing her as changing from a happy-go-lucky girl to a timid recluse that hardly speaks. And the local child safeguarding practice review conducted by City and Hackney Safeguarding Children's Partnership concluded the strip search should never have happened, was unjustified, and that racism was likely to have been an influencing factor. That is on a child. And that's the impact that race violence has on Black women in particular. And when I say Black as well, I sometimes I mean the political Black, which includes all women who do not fit into the white definition. But that's the impact it can have. It's absolutely horrific.
Yeah. And I'm so glad that you both spoke to experiences from individuals as race violence is being experienced, because I think what can happen so often is you look at popular media and the news, or you look at legal responses to race violence, and they completely absent the people that are actually going through it. And I think in talking through the impacts, you've both done an amazing job of reminding us that there are people that suffer at the hands of race violence. This is fundamentally, and again, bringing up intersectionality and misogynoir was really important to highlight, that there are people that come at the end of these intersections. And for that reason, actually, I think this is a really great time for you to both expand on how the work you both do involves you in helping the people that go through these things, and also looks forward at preventing race violence in the UK, or just kind of on a larger scale. So maybe Darshana, starting with you.
Yeah. So the work I do with Peterborough Women's Aid is the project, which is the Dahlia Project, and that is to try and encourage women from South Asian communities, especially the different religious communities, obviously, to come forward and talk about their trauma, to seek help. And that is also by training a lot of women from the same community to be the people who give that support, because sometimes you need to see someone like yourself, or you need to talk to someone like yourself to trust and to say what help you need. So that is what we're trying to do, and that is something we're trying to do with the Home Office. But on a larger scale, I'm actually, even with the things like I mentioned, the pressure shows, I'm trying to work with Parliament. So I have a background as a civil servant and working with this. So I'm trying to work with Parliament to see how much we can change all of these ingrained things, and many of which that Rana has explained so well. And the fact that all of this is happening still in this day and age shows that we haven't moved. We haven't moved from the colonization, all of the stuff that we talk about, or slavery. We haven't actually moved. We've moved from a kind of superficial level, but at a deeper level, a lot of this is a residual, behavior from that. And it's not necessarily the laws are there to protect, but the laws are not. They're there, but they're not exactly protecting either. As the really harrowing story that Abena just said, every child needs to be safeguarded. I used to be a school governor, and I know every child. The safeguarding is such an important issue. How did this happen? But this is not an isolated incident. So obviously, it's just allowed. The law is there to protect, but is it protecting everyone it should? It's not, unfortunately. And yes, we're trying to seek justice, and that's not always happening either. But when it does happen, it's not necessarily something that's going to stop someone else from doing it. And so, so that is what I'm trying to do at a more national level at the moment.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much. And Abena, if you want to speak a little bit as well about the work that you do.
Right. Okay. So one thing I want to say, I remember speaking to a family member, and I was saying that, because I'd gone to visit my family in Ghana, and I said, the colonial masters have gone, but they don't need to be here anymore because they've colonized our brains. So we just carry on in whatever they did. They don't have to be physically here. One thing I want to speak to, I love my quotes, and I love Toni Morrison and Audre Lorde. And there's this quote from Toni Morrison: the very serious function of racism is distraction. It keeps you from doing your work. It keeps you explaining over and over again your reason for being. Somebody says you have no language, and you spend 20 years proving that you do. Somebody says your head isn't shaped properly, so you have scientists work on the fact that it is. Somebody says you have no art, so you dredge that up. Somebody says you have no kingdoms, so you dredge that up. None of this is necessary. There will always be one more thing. So the work I do is just being myself, being my unadulterated self. I do not justify, oh, I'm Black and I'm working in this field and I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I am just living my life. If somebody wants to define me as that Black woman, that's their problem. But what I do, and actually, this is my lunch break between some training that I'm doing called Oh My Life, to support women who have been subjected to a domestic violence and abuse. And when I run that program, I'm going to be running it for any woman. But what I do is every single thing that I do and I talk about, I inject that intersectionality, because that's what's missing. So just by being in a space and being me, I'm actually allowing people to think beyond the, oh, yeah, she's a woman. I'm actually saying, have you thought about, that this person might be trans? Have you thought about this person's race? Have you thought about the intersectionality of this person? If they're neurodiverse, blah, blah, blah. And that's the work that I'm doing. So in general, I could talk about specifics, but I think in general, that's what I want to do. And that's what I want to try to get other people to do as well, to actually see people as individuals rather than a monolith of their culture or a stereotype of their culture.
That is amazing. Thank you so much. We're just coming to the end of our time now. So I actually just wanted to ask either of you if you had any more information you wanted to give out in terms of where people could find out a bit more, or I know we're going to put links down below anyway in terms of how people can reach out to you and connect with you. But yeah, just if you had any parting thoughts, anything you want to encourage people to do.
I think Abena had a list of organizations, so I'll leave that to her to say. But I think from my point, I feel that the women out there who are struggling or just with their identities, not just with violence, to reach out, to use their voice, not to go silent, because just because the system is silencing, making you silent, or someone else is not helping, do reach out, do seek that help, and you are worth it, like just like anyone else, you're worth it, and always remember that. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you. Abena, any parting thoughts?
Yes, so I had some organizations that I will make sure are available, but there's the Sikh Helpline, there's JAMI, which is for Jewish care. The Church of England has some mental health support as well. There's a Muslim community helpline. There's a BAME helpline, which Bernardo's runs. Black Minds, which is therapy for Black people. There's the Black African and Asian Therapy Network. There is also support for adults with ADHD, which is from Mind. Support for Black LGBT people. And there's also Hub of Hope, which provides a lot of support for all sorts of people with different identities. I would say that, in talking about all of these things, it can be quite heavy. There is a lot of hate around. There is a lot of trauma sometimes in being a woman, being a Black woman, being having some of these identities. But I always go back to Audre Lorde and her quote, which I can't find on my sheet at the moment, so I'm going to paraphrase, but caring for myself, self-care, is not self-indulgent. It's an act of political warfare. So whenever, I know that the world isn't rosy. I don't have my rose-tinted glasses on all the time, but we all have the same beginning. We all have the same end. And you can choose to spend your whole life thinking about how people are trying to oppress you, how people are trying to stop you, or you can choose to see that, but say, I'm going to do it anyway. And you can actually do it anyway. It doesn't matter what they're saying. What the only control you have is how you perceive, or how much of what they say externally that you decide to take in internally. So what I do is I hear the hate sometimes, and I say, I'm going to do it anyway. Don't care. Sorry for you that you have so much hate in your heart, but I don't really have time for that. Obviously, there are certain manifestations which you have to deal with face on, but others, you can just say, you choose to be like that, I choose to be like me, and I choose to live, I choose joy rather than your hate. So that's what I focus on.
That is amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you both so much for your time. This has been amazing. It's been wonderful and insightful, and I feel like I've learned so much from both of you. So I hope all of our viewers and listeners have done also. All of the links mentioned will obviously be under the video, both if anyone wants to reach out to you, but also if they feel they need help in general. So yeah, thank you so much everyone for watching and for listening. If you are able to donate to Safe Spaces Now, please do. Links to that will be under this video also. But yes, thank you so much, both of you again. And stay tuned for the next episode of 16 Days of Activism, obviously, which should be tomorrow. But thank you so much. This has been so amazing. Thank you. Have a great day, guys. Thank you.
Don't forget to donate to Safe Spaces now, link next to the video.